Hi there. Welcome to Melted Stone, the spot for stories that grab you and won't let you go. If you love drama, surprises, and moments that make you say, no way, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into tales full of twists, bold moves, and endings you'll remember. This is Melted Stone. Hit the bell and let's get the story rolling.
Eva.
The tablet glowed against the granite countertop like a digital confession waiting to be read. Mason Delaney's coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The message thread between his wife Eva and someone called LP burned into his retinas with each scroll. He suspects nothing. Tomorrow after his presentation, we'll have the conversation. Are you ready for this, baby? Once we pull the trigger, there's no going back. I've been ready since our first night together. Mason's become predictable, boring. You make me feel alive again. Mason's analytical mind, the same one that had built his reputation as the most methodical project manager at Titan Cybersecurity, began processing data points with surgical precision. LP Logan Pierce, his client, the man whose company's security infrastructure Mason had personally designed, the man who'd been coming to their house for strategy sessions while Mason worked late. The marble kitchen felt like ice against his palms as he steadied himself. 14 years of marriage. 14 years of building a life in this pristine suburban fortress with its perfect lawn and perfect neighbors and perfect lies. His phone buzzed. Eva's location showed the Meridian Fitness Center, her usual Wednesday routine. He had maybe 2 hours before she returned, flush-faced and radiant, ready to kiss him hello with lips that had been whispering betrayal. The surveillance software installed cleanly. Mason's fingers moved with practiced efficiency across Eva's devices, years of cybersecurity expertise guiding each keystroke. Audio monitoring, location tracking, message interception, all invisible, all undetectable. If Eva wanted to play games with digital breadcrumbs, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. His phone chimed. A text from Eva. Running late today. Grab dinner without me. Love you. The exclamation points felt like knife wounds. He typed back, no problem. Love you too. 3 days of digital surveillance painted a picture more devastating than Mason had imagined. Logan Pierce wasn't just Eva's lover. He was her co-conspirator in methodical financial dismantling. Text threads revealed a plan spanning months. Joint accounts slowly drained, assets transferred, a post-divorce splitting arrangement that would leave Mason with nothing but his salary and a mortgage. But it was the conversation he recorded through Eva's phone that broke something fundamental inside him. I actually feel bad for him sometimes, Eva's voice speaking to her friend Harper at some trendy wine bar. Mason's not evil, just lifeless. When Logan touches me, I remember what it feels like to be wanted. Girl, you deserve happiness, Harper's voice thick with enablement. And Logan's loaded, way better than Mason's middle management salary. The prenup makes things complicated, but Logan's lawyer found loopholes. We'll trigger an infidelity clause, except we'll make it look like Mason was cheating. His cyber background makes it easy to plant evidence. You're really going to destroy him? I'm going to free myself. Tomorrow morning, I'm serving papers. I'll cry, play the sufferer. Mason's too analytical to see through emotional manipulation. By next month, I'll be in Logan's penthouse, and Mason will be wondering what hit him. They laughed, actually laughed. Mason sat in his home office, listening to his wife orchestrate his destruction while planning to frame him for infidelity. The recording device felt warm in his palm. 14 gigabytes of betrayal captured in pristine digital clarity. The next morning arrived with false spring sunshine and Eva's practiced tears. She sat across from him at their breakfast table, documents spread like weapons between the fresh flowers and French press coffee. Mason, I can't do this anymore. Her voice trembled with rehearsed vulnerability. I know about your affair. He almost admired the performance, the subtle catch in her throat, the way she twisted her wedding ring, the careful placement of fabricated evidence, credit card statements for restaurants he'd never visited, hotel receipts bearing his forged signature. I don't want to fight, she continued, tears streaming with Hollywood precision. I just want this to end quietly, sign the papers, and we can both move on. Mason studied the documents. The settlement terms were exactly as he'd heard them planned, catastrophic for him, liberating for her. Eva watched his face, probably expecting shock, denial, pleading. Instead, he reached for a pen. You're right. he said quietly, signing each page with deliberate care. We should end this quietly. Ava blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Just like that. Just like that. Mason capped the pen and slid the papers across polished wood. I'll have my things out by the weekend. As Eva gathered the documents with trembling hands, triumph or nervousness, he couldn't tell, Mason allowed himself a small smile. She was looking down, focused on her victory, and missed the expression entirely. After she left, Mason walked to his home office and opened a locked drawer. Inside lay a flash drive containing 3 weeks of surveillance data, financial records proving her theft, and audio recordings of every conversation about her frame job conspiracy. His phone rang. Kendra Lowell, the best family law attorney in the state, answered on the first ring. Miss Lowell, this is Mason Delaney. I need to discuss offensive strategy, not defensive. How quickly can we move? Kendra Lowell's law office occupied the 42nd floor of downtown's most expensive building, all glass and steel angles that cut through the city like crystallized ambition. Mason sat across from her, watching her manicured fingers dance across legal documents with surgical precision. Your wife made a critical error, Kendra said, her voice carrying the kind of cold authority that won courtroom battles. The prenup she's trying to exploit has a reciprocal clause. If she commits fraud or conspires to defame you, she forfeits all settlement rights and becomes liable for punitive damages. Mason leaned back in leather that probably cost more than most people's cars. How punitive? Everything. House, savings, even her business assets, plus attorney fees and damages for emotional distress. Kendra's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. But we need to be strategic. Let her think she's winning while we build an airtight case. His phone buzzed. Caleb, his IT assistant from Titan Cybersecurity. Coffee. Need to discuss that side project you mentioned. 20 minutes later, Mason sat in a corner booth at Grind Coffee, watching Caleb's eyes widen as he explained the surveillance operation. Jesus, Mason, she really tried to frame you for cheating? Caleb stirred his latte with nervous energy. What do you need? Logan Pierce's corporate communications. His company uses our security protocols. There might be vulnerabilities we can exploit legally. You want me to hack your own client? I want you to perform routine security testing that happens to uncover evidence of fraud. Mason's voice carried the calm precision that had made him legendary in project management. Everything documented, everything legal, everything devastating. Caleb nodded slowly. When do we start? That evening, Mason initiated phase 1 of his offensive strategy. He drove to Logan Pierce's neighborhood, a gated community where houses cost more than small countries' GDP, and parked across from the Pierce residence. Logan's wife, Danielle, was exactly as he'd researched. Former prosecutor turned stay-at-home mom, 2 kids in private school. A woman who'd sacrificed her career for a husband, now publicly humiliating her. The call came at 9:47 p.m. Mrs. Pierce, this is Mason Delaney. I believe we need to talk about our spouses. The silence stretched for 15 seconds before Danielle's voice, carefully controlled. I think you're right. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Meridian Park, come alone. Meanwhile, Eva's digital footprint painted an increasingly reckless picture. Location data showed she'd spent 4 nights this week at Logan's corporate apartment. Credit card records revealed expensive dinners, jewelry purchases, spa treatments, all funded by money she'd gradually siphoned from their joint accounts. But it was the social media activity that provided Mason's masterstroke opportunity. Eva's Instagram had become a shrine to her affair, carefully disguised as living my best life content. Photos from exclusive restaurants Logan had taken her to, gym selfies taken at facilities near his office, even subtle shots of masculine hands that weren't Mason's. Her follower count had exploded. The fitness influencer world loved a good transformation story, and Eva's sudden lifestyle upgrade had attracted major sponsor attention. Brand Bloom Fitness, Lux Athleisure, and Titanium Nutrition had all signed endorsement deals worth 6 figures combined. Mason spent a weekend installing micro cameras throughout his own house, entirely legal since he still owned it. Then he did something that felt like stepping off a cliff. He invited Eva over for a reconciliation dinner. She arrived in a dress that cost more than his monthly salary, her smile brittle with fake hope. Mason, I'm so glad you called. Maybe we can work through this. The cameras captured everything. Her nervous laughter when he mentioned counseling, her relieved sigh when he suggested they take things slow, and most importantly, her phone call to Logan from Mason's bathroom. Baby, it's working perfectly. He's completely buying the Reconciliation Act. We'll string him along for a few more weeks, then hit him with the final papers once I've secured more assets. 3 days later, Brand Bloom Fitness received an anonymous package containing video footage of their spokesperson discussing fraud, theft, and conspiracy. The termination letter arrived within hours. What the hell is this? Eva's voice was pure venom as she stormed into Mason's temporary apartment. Brand Bloom dropped me. They said I violated moral character clauses. Mason looked up from his laptop, expression carefully neutral. That's terrible. What reason did they give? They wouldn't say. Just some BS about information that conflicts with brand values. Eva paced like a caged animal. This has to be connected to the divorce. Are you sabotaging my career? Eva, I'm a cybersecurity manager, not some corporate assassin. Maybe they heard about the divorce and got nervous about controversy. Every word was recorded. Her mounting paranoia, her accusations, her threats, all captured in high-definition audio that would play beautifully in court. You're lying, she screamed. You've always been jealous of my success. You can't stand that I built something without you. Built something? Mason's voice remained eerily calm. You mean the platform you created using our joint funds while planning to steal everything we've worked for? Eva's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Mason saved his work and closed the laptop. Just like you don't know Logan Pierce. Just like you don't know about the Meridian Tower apartment. Just like you don't know about the transfer of funds to accounts under Harper's name. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Get out, Eva whispered. It's my apartment, Eva. But don't worry, you won't have to see me much longer. After she left, Mason uploaded the entire confrontation to a secure server. Kendra would love this footage, a perfect example of Eva's volatile, deceptive character. His phone rang. Danielle Pierce. Mason, we need to meet again. I found something in Logan's office, something that changes everything. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as Mason climbed toward his 9 a.m. hearing. 3 weeks had passed since Eva's explosive confrontation, and her world was unraveling with mathematical precision. Lux Athleisure had terminated her endorsement after receiving similar anonymous information about her character. Titanium Nutrition followed 2 days later. Eva's Instagram followers, sensing authenticity issues, began abandoning her in digital droves. But Mason's attention was focused on a different game entirely. Detective Mila Grant occupied a corner table at the courthouse cafeteria, her badge visible beneath an open jacket. 40s, sharp eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen enough betrayal to recognize it from across a room. Mr. Delaney? I'm investigating some unusual digital activity connected to your divorce case. Mason sipped his coffee, expression carefully neutral. What kind of activity? Unauthorized surveillance software on multiple devices, corporate data breaches at Pierce Industries, anonymous tips that seem remarkably well-informed. Grant leaned forward. Someone's playing a very sophisticated game, and you have the skills to be that someone. Detective, I design cybersecurity systems for a living. If I wanted to hack someone, do you think I'd leave traces for you to find? Grant's smile was thin. Sometimes the smartest people outsmart themselves. Before she could respond, Mason's phone buzzed. Text from Danielle Pierce. Emergency? Meet me at the parking garage behind First National. What I found about Logan will destroy him. 20 minutes later, Mason descended into the concrete tomb of underground parking. Danielle's BMW sat in the shadows, engine running. She rolled down the window as he approached, her face drawn with exhaustion and rage. Logan's been running a shell company, she said without preamble. Phantom accounts, fake contracts, money laundering through his legitimate business. I found financial records in his home office. She handed him a flash drive. Everything's on there. Bank statements, forged invoices, wire transfers to offshore accounts. He's been stealing from his own clients. Mason studied the drive. Why give this to me instead of the police? Because the police will take months to build a case, and by then he'll have hidden everything. Danielle's voice was pure steel. But you? You know how to make information appear in the right places at the right times. That evening, Mason made a series of careful decisions. He uploaded Logan's financial records to the FBI's online fraud reporting system, flagging them as potential evidence of corporate embezzlement. He sent copies to the IRS whistleblower program and the State Attorney General's office. Finally, he forwarded everything to Judge Harlan, who was overseeing his own divorce case. But Eva wasn't finished with her own destructive spiral. The charity gala at the Riverside Convention Center was Millbrook's social event of the season. Eva arrived as Logan's date, her behavior increasingly reckless as booze mixed with prescription anxiety medication. The local society photographer captured them dancing, kissing, laughing, a married woman flaunting her affair in front of 300 witnesses. Mason wasn't at the gala, but he didn't need to be. Social media provided real-time documentation of Eva's public humiliation of their marriage. The next morning brought consequences. Logan Pierce was arrested at 6 a.m. outside Serenity Spa, where he'd taken Eva for a celebration breakfast. FBI agents, backed by local police, surrounded him in the parking lot while Eva watched in horror from inside her BMW. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, corporate embezzlement. The press release mentioned anonymous tips that had triggered the investigation. Mason was having coffee when his phone rang. "You fool." Eva's voice was raw with hysteria. "You did this. You destroyed Logan." "Eva, I was at work when Logan was arrested. Check the security cameras. Don't play innocent. This is all connected. My sponsors, Logan's arrest, everything. You're systematically destroying my life." "Maybe your life is destroying itself," Mason said quietly. "Actions have consequences." But Eva had already hung up. That afternoon, Mason received an unexpected visitor. Eva's father, Richard Sutton, sat across from him in a downtown restaurant, his expression grave. "Mason, I've known you for 15 years. You're not vindictive by nature. But what's happening to Eva and Logan suggests someone with your skill set is pulling strings." Richard had been Logan's business partner in several real estate ventures, a detail Mason had discovered during his research. "What exactly are you suggesting, Richard?" "I'm suggesting that if you're orchestrating this campaign, you should consider the legal ramifications. Eva may be making poor choices, but deliberately sabotaging someone's life crosses lines that could land you in prison." Mason met his father-in-law's stare without flinching. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. Whatever evidence you think you have, whatever game you're playing, it stops now, or I make sure you face consequences." That evening, Mason called Kendra with an update. "Richard Sutton just tried to intimidate me into backing down. He's clearly more invested in protecting Logan than he let on." "Interesting." Kendra's voice carried satisfaction. "A business partner trying to silence a witness? That could constitute obstruction of justice. What's our next move?" "We accelerate everything. File for contempt based on Eva's gala behavior, submit all surveillance evidence, and request an emergency hearing. It's time to end this war." But Mason's war was about to become more complicated. The video of Logan's arrest, captured by a bystander's phone, had been uploaded to TikTok and Instagram by anonymous accounts. The footage showed Eva screaming at police officers, demanding they release Logan, creating a scene that quickly went viral. #influencer meltdown began trending within hours. Detective Grant called that evening. "Whoever's been orchestrating this media campaign just made a critical error. We've traced the anonymous social media accounts to IP addresses with concerning patterns. This investigation just became very serious, Mr. Delaney." Mason smiled as he hung up. The detective was right about one thing. The game had just become very serious indeed. The warehouse in Millbrook's industrial district hadn't been used for legitimate business in 20 years. Mason walked through its echoing emptiness, his footsteps creating hollow percussion against concrete that had witnessed decades of decay. Dwayne Locke emerged from the shadows like something out of a noir film, 6 feet of weathered muscle and permanent 5 o'clock shadow, a former police detective who'd turned private investigation into art form. "You sure about this location?" Locke's voice carried the gravelly authority of someone who'd seen too much human nature. "It feels like a place where people get disappeared." "Privacy is essential for what we're discussing," Mason replied. "Eva's friend Harper has been running interference for months. I need to know everything about her: financials, criminal history, weaknesses." Locke pulled out a tablet. "Harper Kendall, 28, works as a social media consultant. But that's just the surface layer." He swiped through files. 3 arrests for possession, 2 for public intoxication, 1 for check fraud that got pleaded down. She's been Eva's enabler because she's getting paid for it. Paid how? Ava's been funneling money through Harper's consulting business to hide assets from the divorce. Fake invoices for social media services, inflated contracts, cash payments disguised as business expenses. Locke's smile was carnivory. Harper's been helping Ava commit fraud while using the money to feed her own obsessions. Mason studied the financial records. Ava's deception ran deeper than he'd imagined. A sophisticated money laundering operation using Harper as a front. There's more, Locke continued. Harper's been dealing pills at those fitness influencer parties Eva attends. Adderall, Xanax, some harder stuff. She's not just an enabler, she's Ava's supplier. Can you prove it? Already have. Video surveillance from 3 different parties, text message records, financial transactions. Locke's expression was grim satisfaction. One anonymous tip to the right detective, and Harper's looking at serious felony charges. That night, Mason sat in his apartment reviewing everything Locke had uncovered. Eva's network of deception extended beyond infidelity into criminal enterprise. The betrayal felt almost abstract now, just data points in a larger pattern of destruction. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop what you're doing or Eva pays the price. Mason stared at the message. Someone was threatening his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, to get to him. The irony was almost amusing. He forwarded the text to Locke with a note. Find out who sent this. The response came within an hour. Traced to a burner phone purchased with cash, but I have an idea who's behind it. Harper's cousin Marcus has been asking questions about you around town. Criminal history includes stalking and intimidation. Want me to handle it? Mason's response was immediate. No violence, just information. But information was becoming a weapon more dangerous than anything physical. 3 days later, Harper Kendall was arrested outside Zenith Fitness during her regular Thursday morning networking session. The charges were extensive: possession with intent to distribute, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud. The timing was perfect. Harper's arrest occurred in full view of Ava's remaining professional contacts, creating maximum social media exposure for minimum effort. Ava's reaction was swift and predictable. She appeared at Mason's apartment building at 11 p.m., bypassing the security desk through sheer determination and rage. The temporary restraining order she'd filed against him the week before made her presence technically illegal, but Eva was beyond caring about legal consequences. Mason opened his door to find her disheveled, mascara-streaked, vibrating with fury and desperation. "You destroyed Harper!" she screamed, loud enough to wake the entire floor. "She's sitting in jail because of your sick revenge fantasy. Eva, you're violating the restraining order by being here. I don't care. You've systematically destroyed everyone I care about. Logan's in federal prison, Harper's facing felony charges, my career is ruined, all because your pathetic ego couldn't handle being left." Mason stepped into the hallway, phone already recording. "You need to leave, now." "Or what? You'll call the police like you called them on Harper? You'll plant more evidence? You'll ruin more lives?" Ava's voice was becoming hysterical. "I know what you are now, Mason. You're not some innocent sufferer. You're a monster." Neighbors began opening doors, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Chen from 4B had her phone out, clearly recording the scene. "Ava, please lower your voice. You're disturbing everyone." "Good. I want them to see what you really are." Eva jabbed her finger toward his chest. "You think you're so smart, so in control, but I'm going to expose everything. The surveillance, the manipulation, the way you've been stalking me." "I haven't been stalking you, Ava. I've been documenting your criminal behavior." "Criminal?" Her laugh was borderline unhinged. "You're the criminal. You hacked my phone. You destroyed my business relationships. You framed Logan." "Logan framed himself with embezzlement and tax fraud. Harper destroyed herself with pill dealing and money laundering. I just made sure the right people had access to relevant information." Eva's face went white with rage. She raised her hand as if to strike him, then seemed to realize she was surrounded by witnesses with cameras. "This isn't over," she whispered. "I'm going to prove what you've done, and when I do, you'll lose everything." "Eva," Mason's voice was eerily calm, "you already lost everything. You just haven't accepted it yet." Security arrived as Eva fled toward the stairwell, her sobs echoing through the emergency exit. Mason returned to his apartment and sent the recording to Kendra with a note. "Restraining order violation with multiple witnesses. How quickly can we get her arrested?" The response came immediately. "Police report filed. Warrant should be issued within 24 hours. Your ex-wife just sealed her own fate." But as Mason stood at his window watching Eva's BMW disappear into traffic, he caught his reflection in the glass. The man staring back was someone he barely recognized. Cold, calculated, empty of everything except the machinery of revenge. His phone buzzed, the same unknown number as before. "You just made a serious mistake. Tomorrow, you'll understand the consequences." This time, Mason didn't forward the message to Locke. Instead, He walked to his closet and retrieved a lockbox containing his father's service revolver, legally registered, properly maintained, loaded, and ready. If Harper's cousin Marcus wanted to escalate this beyond information warfare, Mason was prepared to respond accordingly. The abandoned property sat 20 miles outside Millbrook, a decaying reminder of Mason's grandfather's failed farming ambitions. 15 acres of overgrown fields surrounding a collapsing farmhouse that hadn't seen inhabitants in 30 years. Mason had inherited the land along with childhood memories of summer visits and his grandfather's stories about perseverance through hard times. Now it would serve a different purpose entirely. The text message had been explicit. Bring $50,000 in cash to the old Delaney farm tonight at 10 p.m., or Eva's dirty secrets become public knowledge. Come alone. Marcus Kendall had done his research, Mason had to admit. The threat was sophisticated, not physical violence, but information warfare. The promise to release evidence of Mason's surveillance activities, his manipulation of Ava's business relationships, his coordination with Danielle Pierce. The irony was delicious. Marcus was attempting to blackmail Mason using the same tactics Mason had employed against Eva and Logan. But Mason had spent 3 months thinking like a chess player, not a sufferer. He arrived at the farmhouse at 9:30 p.m., parking behind the collapsed barn where his vehicle wouldn't be visible from the access road. The briefcase in his passenger seat contained $50,000 in genuine currency, withdrawn from accounts Eva didn't know existed. Mason had been preparing for this moment since receiving the first threat. The house was exactly as he remembered. Peeling paint, sagging porch, broken windows that stared like dead eyes across forgotten fields. But the infrared motion sensors he'd installed were invisible in the darkness, as were the cameras positioned to capture every angle of approach. Marcus arrived at 9:55 p.m., driving a pickup truck that had seen better decades. He was younger than Mason expected, maybe 25, with the kind of lean desperation that came from a lifetime of bad decisions and worse luck. "You came," Marcus called out, staying near his vehicle. "Smart man." "I brought what you asked for." Mason held up the briefcase. "But first, I want to see what you're offering." Marcus pulled out a tablet, its screen glowing against his face. "Photos of you installing surveillance equipment in your own house. Bank records showing payments to that private investigator. Phone logs proving you coordinated with Logan's wife to destroy his business." "Interesting collection," Mason replied. "How did you acquire it?" "Harper had copies of everything before she got arrested. Insurance, she called it. Smart girl, smarter than Eva ever gave her credit for." Mason nodded thoughtfully. "And you think this information is worth $50,000? "I think it's worth keeping you out of federal prison for cyber stalking, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy charges." Marcus's smile was pure carnivory confidence. "Your move, Mason." What Marcus didn't know was that every word of their conversation was being transmitted to a recording device in Mason's jacket. What he also didn't know was that Detective Grant and 2 other officers were positioned half a mile away, waiting for Mason's signal. But Mason wasn't ready to end the game yet. "You're right," he said, walking toward Marcus with the briefcase. "This information could be problematic for me." Marcus relaxed slightly, sensing victory. "But here's what you don't understand," Mason continued, stopping 10 feet away. "Harper didn't just have copies of evidence against me. She had copies of evidence against you." Marcus's confidence flickered. "What are you talking about?" "The pill dealing, Marcus. The money laundering through Harper's business. The threats against witnesses in a federal case." Mason's voice carried the calm authority of someone holding all the cards. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate you before agreeing to meet?" "You're bluffing." Mason pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Harper's voice, clear and damning. "Marcus has been my supplier for 2 years. Pills, mainly, but he's got connections for harder stuff. He keeps detailed records because he's paranoid about getting ripped off." The color drained from Marcus's face. "That recording was made 3 weeks ago, during one of Harper's last conversations before her arrest. She was scared, Marcus. Scared enough to confess everything to someone she trusted." "Who?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Detective Mila Grant, Pill Enforcement Division." Mason smiled. "Did you really think Harper got arrested because of anonymous tips about party pills? She got arrested because she became a confidential informant to reduce her own charges." The trap had been months in the making. Harper's arrest wasn't random. It was coordinated. Mason had provided information about her money laundering activities, But Detective Grant had been building a pill distribution case that needed Harper's cooperation to reach higher-level dealers, like Marcus. The briefcase doesn't contain money, Mason continued. It contains recording equipment that's been documenting your confession to blackmail and conspiracy charges. The moment you demanded payment for silence, you committed multiple felonies. Marcus reached for his pocket, probably going for a weapon or his phone. He never got the chance. Police vehicles emerged from concealment positions, floodlights turning night into harsh daylight. Detective Grant's voice boomed through a megaphone. Marcus Kendall, you're under arrest. Keep your hands visible and step away from the vehicle. As officers swarmed the scene, Mason walked calmly back to his car. The briefcase remained on the ground, its recording equipment having served its purpose perfectly. His phone rang before he reached the access road. Mr. Delaney? Prosecutor Jennifer Fells, the district attorney who'd been building cases against Logan, Harper, and now Marcus. We need to talk about your cooperation in tonight's operation. Of course, but I should mention, there's been a development in the EVA Delaney situation. What kind of development? She's been officially charged with fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. Federal charges, based on evidence we've been accumulating for months. The silence stretched for several seconds. Mr. Delaney, I'm beginning to wonder if you've been orchestrating this entire situation from the beginning. Mason's smile was invisible in the darkness. Prosecutor Fells, I'm just a cybersecurity manager who happened to discover his wife was committing crimes. Everything else has been a matter of making sure the right information reached the right people at the right times. That sounds dangerously close to vigilante justice. No, Mason replied. It sounds like justice, period. But as he drove home through empty streets, Mason couldn't shake the feeling that his transformation was far from complete. Ava was facing federal charges, but she wasn't finished fighting. Logan was in prison, but his connections ran deep. Harper was cooperating with prosecutors, but desperation made people unpredictable. The war wasn't over, it was entering its final phase, and Mason Delaney was ready to burn everything down to win it. The coastal cottage perched on Oregon's rugged shoreline, like something from a different century, all weathered cedar and salt-stained glass facing endless Pacific horizons. Mason stood on the deck, watching morning fog dissolve into crystalline autumn air, holding a cup of coffee that actually tasted like coffee instead of the bitter fuel he'd survived on for months. 6 months had passed since Marcus Kendall's arrest. 6 months since Eva's world had collapsed into federal prosecution and public disgrace. 6 months since Mason Delaney had systematically dismantled everyone who'd conspired to destroy him. The scoreboard was final and comprehensive. Eva faced 18 federal charges ranging from money laundering to conspiracy to commit fraud. Her influencer career was extinct, her social media presence scrubbed, her financial assets frozen pending criminal proceedings. Last he'd heard, she was living with her aunt in rural Oregon, working at a grocery store, her face carefully hidden beneath baseball caps and sunglasses. Logan Pierce was serving a 10-year sentence in federal prison for corporate embezzlement and tax evasion. His business empire had been liquidated to pay sufferers of his fraud, his penthouse sold at auction, his reputation permanently destroyed. Harper Kendall had testified against both Ava and her cousin Marcus in exchange for reduced charges. She was currently serving 18 months in minimum security, her social media consulting business defunct, her party girl lifestyle a memory. Marcus Kendall faced 25 years for pill distribution, blackmail, and conspiracy charges. Detective Grant had used his arrest to unravel an entire regional pill network, making her career while destroying his. And Mason? Mason had walked away with everything. The divorce settlement had been more devastating than Kendra Lowell had originally projected. Eva's fraud and conspiracy charges had triggered every punitive clause in their prenup, leaving her liable for attorney fees, court costs, and damages. Mason retained full ownership of their house, their investments, and their joint business assets. But more importantly, he'd retained something else: complete legal immunity. Prosecutor Jennifer Fells had offered Mason witness protection status in exchange for his cooperation in building cases against everyone else. Every action he'd taken, the surveillance, the information warfare, the coordination with Detective Grant, had been retroactively classified as lawful cooperation with ongoing criminal investigations. The system had legitimized his revenge and called it justice. His phone buzzed. A text from Ava Knox. Interview prep in an hour. Ready to tell your story? Ava was a different kind of woman entirely. Sharp, where Eva had been shallow; authentic, where Eva had been performative; dangerous, where Eva had been merely destructive. They'd met during the trial proceedings when she'd been covering the case for a true crime podcast. Her questions had been more incisive than most prosecutors, her understanding of human nature more sophisticated than most therapists. She also had secrets Mason was still unraveling. A background in investigative journalism that included some ethically questionable techniques, connections to people who operated in legal gray areas, a past that included its own stories of revenge and transformation. In other words, she was perfect. The interview was being conducted in Mason's living room, cameras and lighting equipment transforming his minimalist space into a professional studio. The production company was creating a documentary about digital age revenge, and Mason's story had become their centerpiece. "Let's start with the beginning," Ava said, settling into the chair across from him. "The moment you discovered your wife's betrayal, what went through your mind?" Mason considered the question, aware that his answer would be viewed by millions of people trying to understand how an ordinary man had orchestrated such comprehensive destruction. "Clarity," he said finally. "For the first time in years, everything made sense. Eva's distance, her sudden interest in fitness, her new circle of friends, the financial irregularities I'd noticed but dismissed. It all clicked into place like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving." "But you didn't confront her immediately." "Why?" "Because confrontation is emotional, and emotion makes you stupid. I'm a systems analyst by training. I see problems as data sets that need to be understood before they can be solved. Ava wasn't just cheating. She was running a complex operation designed to destroy me financially and legally. Fighting that required strategy, not anger." Ava leaned forward slightly. "Some viewers might see your response as calculated, even cold. How do you respond to criticism that you went too far?" Mason's smile was razor thin. Too far would have been violence. Too far would have been illegal activity. Too far would have been targeting innocent people. He paused, letting the words settle. "I simply made sure that people who were committing crimes face consequences for those crimes. If that seems excessive, perhaps the problem isn't my response, it's our society's tolerance for fraud, theft, and conspiracy." "What about Eva? She's lost everything. Her career, her reputation, her freedom. Do you feel any regret about what happened to her?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Mason studied Ava's face, recognizing the journalist's instinct to probe for emotional vulnerability. "Ava made choices," he said carefully. "She chose to commit infidelity. She chose to steal marital assets. She chose to conspire with Logan Pierce to frame me for infidelity. She chose to launder money through Harper's business. Every consequence she's facing flows directly from decisions she made while believing she was smarter than everyone around her." "But do you regret it? The destruction of your marriage, the impact on both your lives?" Mason was quiet for a long moment, genuinely considering the question. "I regret that it was necessary," he said finally. "I regret that Eva chose betrayal over honesty, theft over conversation, conspiracy over divorce. I regret that 14 years of marriage meant so little to her that she was willing to destroy me for financial gain. But do I regret stopping her? No, never." The cameras captured everything: his measured responses, his controlled expression, the complete absence of visible remorse. Mason knew exactly how he would appear to viewers, either a brilliant strategist who'd outsmarted his enemies, or a sociopathic manipulator who'd destroyed lives for personal satisfaction. He was comfortable with either interpretation. "What's next for you?" Ava asked as they wrapped up the formal interview. "You've written a book, relocated to this beautiful cottage, seemingly started over completely." "I'm consulting now," Mason replied. "Helping people who've been victimized by fraud, manipulation, betrayal. There's more demand for that expertise than you might expect." What he didn't mention was the nature of his consulting work. Mason had become something unprecedented, a revenge architect for people with money and legitimate grievances. Corporate executives betrayed by business partners, wealthy individuals targeted by gold diggers, families destroyed by inheritance fraud. They came to him seeking not just justice, but systematic, legal, comprehensive destruction of their enemies. He was very good at it, and very expensive. After the crew finished packing their equipment, Mason and Ava walked onto the deck overlooking the Pacific. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of amber and crimson. "Can I ask you something off the record?" Ava said, leaning against the railing. "Always. Was it worth it, really? The months of planning, the emotional cost, the transformation into someone you barely recognize. Mason considered the question as waves crashed against rocks 50 feet below. 3 years ago, I was a middle management employee living a lie with a woman who saw me as a financial asset to be harvested. I was predictable, forgettable, expendable. He gestured toward the cottage, the coastline, the freedom that money and victory had purchased. Now I'm someone who helps people reclaim power from those who've stolen it. I own my life completely, answer to no one, and sleep soundly every night. That sounds like a yes. It wasn't revenge, Ava. It was correction. As darkness settled over the Oregon coast, Mason's phone buzzed with a new message. A potential client in Seattle, a tech entrepreneur whose business partner had been systematically stealing intellectual property while planning a hostile takeover. The message included financial details, timeline requirements, and a simple question. Can you help me destroy him legally? Mason smiled as he typed his response. When can we meet? Behind him, Ava was reviewing footage on her camera, probably preparing to edit his story into something that would fascinate and terrify viewers in equal measure. The documentary would paint him as either a hero or a villain, depending on the audience's perspective on justice versus revenge. But Mason knew the truth was simpler than either characterization. He was someone who'd learned that the world respected strength, rewarded careful planning, and punished those foolish enough to underestimate their opponents. Eva had made the mistake of seeing him as weak, predictable, manageable. Logan had made the mistake of thinking his wealth and connections made him untouchable. Harper had made the mistake of believing her criminal activities were invisible. Marcus had made the mistake of threatening someone more dangerous than himself. They'd all paid the price for their arrogance. Mason Delaney was no longer the man who'd sat in his granite kitchen, reading his wife's betrayal on a glowing tablet screen. That man had been a sufferer, reactive and powerless. The man standing on this Oregon coastline was something else entirely, an architect of consequences, a strategist of systematic destruction, someone who understood that true power came not from violence or wealth, but from information, patience, and the willingness to see justice through to its logical conclusion. His phone rang, the Seattle client, eager to begin. Mr. Delaney, I've read about your work. I need someone destroyed, but it has to be completely legal, completely thorough, and completely permanent. Mason walked back into his cottage, already beginning to formulate strategy. Tell me everything, he said, settling into his chair with the satisfaction of someone who'd found his true calling. And I mean everything. Details are what separate amateurs from professionals. As he listened to another story of betrayal and conspiracy, Mason caught his reflection in the window. No longer the hollow-eyed sufferer he'd been months earlier, but someone who'd transformed pain into power, weakness into strength, victimization into expertise. The ember in his shadow had finally become the fire, and Mason Delaney was just getting started. Outside, the Pacific Ocean stretched toward horizons that held infinite possibilities for those brave enough to pursue them. Tomorrow would bring new clients, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that justice wasn't just an abstract concept. It was an art form that required skill, patience, and absolute commitment to see it through. Ava was working at a grocery store in rural Oregon, her dreams of influence and luxury reduced to scanning barcodes and counting register drawers. Logan was learning that federal prison respected neither wealth nor connections. Harper was discovering that cooperation with prosecutors didn't guarantee forgiveness from the justice system. And Mason Delaney was building an empire based on the simple principle that actions have consequences, and some people needed help ensuring those consequences were comprehensive, legal, and permanent. The transformation was complete. The war was won. The future belonged to those smart enough to learn from other people's mistakes and strong enough to capitalize on their enemies' weaknesses. Mason smiled as he continued listening to his new client's story, already seeing the patterns, already identifying the vulnerabilities, already planning the systematic dismantling of another life built on betrayal and arrogance. Some people called it revenge. Mason called it justice. The difference was purely semantic.